They're all stored in our vault in manuscript boxes. I think we're on box 2000 something at the moment. The older materials, the golden age materials that are printed on newsprint are all deacidified, and we work with our preservation section to actually maintain appropriate temperature and climate controls, as well as to treat materials that are kind of basically destroying themselves because they're printed on terrible paper. So this was really interesting. So for this particular piece, we showed it, and then a few tables down was our first copy of Yusaki Yojimbo #1, and so it was interesting kind of thinking about, that happens all the time at the library, where Miyamoto Musashi, sorry if I'm butchering that pronunciation, was actually the inspiration for the character Yosagi Yojimbo, from what I have read. So we have an original print here at the library that depicts him, and then we have the comic book, which was inspired by that particular person. And so there's a lot of connections there that I think are really interesting, and that I personally love being a part of, when researchers come to the library and they're actually making those connections, and I can help them find things throughout the library that can help them do whatever their research is, or they're looking for inspiration for their work, or they're a student kind of coming to learn about particular styles. So I've probably talked longer than I should have.
Oh no, you're fine.
Okay. So let's see. What am I forgetting?
Well, actually, I have a quick question.
Yeah.
So, bringing it back to things that were inspired from Japanese pop culture to American comics, Voltron is coming out with season 7. It's on Netflix right now. So, I'm into mech really heavy right now. It kind of led me back to Gundam and like G Gundam and things like that. So what do we have in our collections that fall in the lines of like giant robots and things like that?
That's good timing. So a colleague of mine and I worked to kind of dig through the collection and see what we had related to it. So we have the first issue of Shogun Warriors. So the late 70s, early 80s were kind of a big time in US comics, kind of looking at Transformers and some of the other titles that were either inspired by original Japanese publications or by Japanese publications that were turned into toys or television shows and then came out in comic book format. So like I was saying, there's a lot of overlap. So you're seeing examples right now of some of the things that we have there at the library. And if you wanted to read issue number 2 of Robotech, you would come to my reading room and you'd request it and we would pull it for you. We don't have, for example, the Mighty Atom was originally published in English, I believe, in the 1960s. We don't have that issue. It's now on my want list. I'm looking for it. If anybody has one that they want to donate to the library, I guess I should also say, the library, we do purchase some materials, but primarily most of the collection comes through either gift or through U.S. copyright deposit. So this was actually a gift donated to our book sale. These issues of Nausicaa. Somebody had their collection. They donated it to the staff book sale, and I saw it, and I bought them for the collection, and then cataloged them for our section. It sort of is kind of funny serendipity like that. But yeah, I'm sure we have a lot more in there that I don't know that we have, because we have, like I said, 150,000 items. So, what you do is, if you know of a particular title that you're interested in, you go to the library's online catalog and search by title. That's generally the easiest way to find things. You can also, Cameron will talk a little bit more about this, send us an Ask a Librarian question. There's a team of reference librarians in every reading room across the library that actually answers questions from the public. So if you sent in a comic book question, it would likely come to me. But if it ends up going to not the right reading room, it'll get forwarded to whoever the most appropriate person is. So if something came in that was asking about Japanese language materials, I would forward it to Cameron's section or to Cameron himself, because I don't read Japanese. So, you know, we try to, even though we're a big institution, we try to work together with all the specialists across the reading rooms to make sure that you're getting the best person to answer the question that you're actually sending us. We do have a chat service, but often we end up having to use the Ask a Librarian service because the questions that chat questions are good for quick things. Sometimes people will come in and they explain their entire PhD dissertation to me on chat, and then I tell them that I can't answer it in 30 seconds, and so then it ends up becoming a much bigger conversation. But the library does have that service available, and it's open to anybody. So we encourage you to get in touch with us if you're not from the area and can't come and visit us. That's one way that you can actually get in touch and try to make use of the resources that we have.
See, we're a cool place, I think so. So leading on to Cameron, tell us about the Asian division.
Okay, well, thank you, Ashley. Yes, so the Asian division is one of the 4 international collections or area studies division in the library, alongside Africa, Middle East, European, and Hispanic divisions. We are in charge of the custodial care, the collection management, and reference services for all of the library's Asian language materials. That's defined from moving eastward, South Asia, Southeast Asia, and then East Asia. And across these collections, we have more than 4 million items. And I work primarily with the Japanese collection, but we also have the Chinese collection, Korean collection, Southeast Asia collection, South Asia collection, and Mongolian and Tibetan. And each of these collections includes, contemporary scholarly works, literature, some popular culture, newspapers, periodicals, and then each of these divisions also has a rare book collection as well. And the items you're seeing here, I think we're in the middle of it right now, are drawn from the Japanese book collection. I'll talk a little bit more about that in a moment. Or actually right now. We have more than 5,900 rare books in the Japanese collection, and these go all the way back to the 8th century, 770. The Hyakumanto Dorani, the 1 million pagodas, really interesting item, Buddhist item, ranging up to the mid-19th century. And so you're seeing some of those illustrated books, illustrated scrolls from the collection. The Japanese collection, outside of the rare books, we have 1.2 million monographs, again, across all manner of topics. We have the largest collection of Japanese materials outside of Japan. That actually holds true for a lot of our other collections as well. The Chinese and Korean collections are the largest of their kind outside of East Asia. And then in terms of historical interest, the Japanese collection benefits from a very interesting historical idiosyncrasy in that a number, more than 100,000 items flowed from the GHQ Allied headquarters during the occupation of Japan following World War II, were confiscated, gathered up for intelligence purposes, and a lot of what they gathered up really wasn't needed, and it made its way back to the library. So we have all manner of strategic reports, reports on other parts of Asia and Japanese, and also a lot of periodicals. So we have 1920s and 30s and early 40s magazines, kid magazines that have cartoons in them. We also have a number of items from the early post-war period, including if you saw the Astro Boy, Tetsuwan Atom over there, that came from that grouping of materials. Let's see. So you might be wondering, well, I don't speak Japanese, and I don't live in Washington, the DC metro area. Well, what can this collection do for me? Well, building on what Megan talked about, I would urge you to check out our Ask a Librarian service. You can take a look at the Asian Division's Reading Room website. Just search for Asian Reading Room. We should be the first hit on Google. At the bottom right of the page is a little link there for Ask a Librarian. So let's say you're reading a particular manga title and you come across something, you're like, wow, did that really happen? Or gee, that's interesting. Where could I go to read more about this? You can send your reference inquiry. No question is too big or too small. Just bear in mind, we can point you towards useful and helpful materials. We can't prepare a strategic, executive report for you, but we can put you in the direction of materials that are available to you. And we also do interlibrary loans. So if there's something that we have and you can't make it here, you can go to your public library, let them know that we have that item in our collection, and you can make a request. And as long as it's not the only copy in the country or particularly rare and fragile, that can be sent to you via interlibrary loan. Oh, yes.
That doesn't apply to the comic book collection.
Fair enough.
So that's one thing in terms of Asian Division reference services. This is something available to everyone. I urge you to take advantage of it. It's also fun for me because then your questions become my work, and they're often very interesting questions, and I love to receive them. Something else I would point you toward, as Megan was talking about, there's all these divisions of the library, and a lot of people don't know just how diverse these different reading rooms are. And my colleague, who's not here with us today, but helped curate the little display we did on Thursday, Catherine Blood from the Princeton Photographs division, just like to put a little plug in for Princeton Photographs. They have an amazing collection of Japanese woodblock prints and other artwork, and much of it has been digitized. Their collection has been digitized to a much greater degree than ours has. So I encourage you right now, if you can feel free to whip out your cell phone. You can do a Google search for PPOC, that's Princeton Photographs Online Catalog, and you can just start searching. I recommend search for Yoshi Toshi. He's a great woodblock artist, and you can see all the prints we have there. You could search for the Miyamoto Musashi image that was there. 36 restaurants?
The series.
Yes, yes. And these are all up there. They're available in different file sizes and formats, and best of all, they're all public domain. You can download them, you can use them in new and creative ways. They're out there for you to explore and use, so I urge you to take a look at that. So you might be thinking, well, okay, that's great, but how, what is of interest, if you're here at Otakon, what sort of things might we have in the division that could be of interest to you? We do have manga, so if there's anything that you would like to see in Japanese, we don't have as extensive of a collection, comic collection as Serials Division does, but we do have many runs of classic manga in the original Japanese. So this includes all the great works by Tezuka Osamu, also Astro Boy, Life of Buddha, etc., etc. We have Mizuki Shigeru, so Gegege Kitaro, and Mizuki Shigeru's accounts of, personal accounts of World War II, among many others. So that's something that's available in the reading room that you can come and use if you're in the area. Again, if you're interested in exploring some of the children's magazines from the 30s, 40s, 50s that we have in the collection, those are available too. All you need is a reader's card, and anyone can get one. All you need is an ID and to be 16 years of age or older. Let's see, what else? And just kind of looking, I was kind of surprised when I was putting together this display. I wondered, well, manga being a seemingly more recent, artistic product and phenomenon, I wasn't sure, well, what could we draw on from the rare book collection that is meaningful or ties into manga in some way. Oh, thank you. If you could skip forward there. And I was very surprised at all the connections that we made, that we did manage to make. So you may have seen the illustrated scroll. The first one in that series is Choju Giga, which some people have pointed to as the first instance of manga in Japanese history. It's debatable, but it's an awesome piece. Yes, this one right here. Then looking at all the illustrated books, especially the Kibiyoshi, the yellow-covered books, illustrated, basically graphic novels from the Edo period, from the late 18th, early 19th century. I believe we have an example up there. really starts to form something that looks like manga or a graphic novel for the first time, at least in the Japanese historical context. And then just the fact that we have, I didn't realize until I've been digging into these early post-war materials, I didn't realize we had an actual original copy of Tetsuwan Atom, Astro Boy. So there's probably more to be discovered, so if you're interested, please come and I can show you how to go about exploring the collection through the online catalog. Also, does anyone ever venture out to try to read manga in Japanese in the original, or in the process of learning Japanese? Some of you, okay, great. We have a lot of language resources as well. One of my favorites are the onomatopoeia dictionaries. So if you're wondering, maybe you see the doki doki, the gata gata, the shin tosuru, and all those sound effects that are going on in the background, even of the manga that get translated. We have a lot of dictionaries that will help you make sense of those. The Japanese publishing industry is particularly blessed with a wealth of dictionaries, and my personal favorite is the Nihon Jisho no Jiten, the Japanese Encyclopedia of Dictionaries, because there's so many. They had to create a reference word to keep track of all the dictionaries for all the different subjects. The dictionary of historical fiction, the dictionary of manga, all this stuff. So those are just some of the things. If you are able to come to the reading room or would like to submit a question to ask the librarian, feel free to ask us anything, really.
Nice. So just to bring in a little question. Before we had this panel, I had me, Cameron, and Catherine Blood, who's not here, but she's amazing. We had a mini powwow session of how to bridge my nerdy anime knowledge and relate it back to something that they may know for historical and cultural context. And that led us to talking about samurai, the way of the samurai, Bushido, things like that. And something interesting came up in the conversation, and we were talking about Afro samurai, and I was telling him the lore behind that. There was a rumor that there might be an actual black samurai in history, and so I'm using this opportunity to ask, is there a possibility?
Okay, well that is precisely the kind of question I would love for people to submit on as a librarian, so I could answer the question during my work hours. That's a good point. So these things crop up in storylines, and you wonder, is there a historical basis, or is that the figment of someone's imagination? I mean, either way, it's a great story, but is there something behind it? Actually, there's a historical figure who's named Yasuke. We don't know a whole lot about him, but he seems to have been picked up in what is now the area of Mozambique by the Portuguese Jesuits, and he traveled with Jesuits to Goa and then on to East Asia and eventually to Japan, and he actually met Oda Nobunaga, and there is some references in Jesuit letters about an African being with them, and then also there's some references in letters that were left that are attributed to Oda Nobunaga. They talk about this black warrior and talk about his strength and how Oda Nobunaga was so fascinated with him. The record doesn't go much beyond that, so a lot of it's kind of people filling in with their imagination. But yes, there's a kernel there. So, and on a side note, I believe I read recently that Gregory Wyden of Highlander fame might be at work on a Yasuke inspired film, so we can keep our fingers crossed on that one.
Yes, thank you so much for all of that. So now to the biggest chunk of this, to copyright. So George, if you can give, before I ask some questions, if you can give just a little bit of blurb on copyright, that would be great.
Yes, hi, I'm George Taroni. I'm really excited about copyright, and my goal today is to make at least one of you excited about copyright. So I'm hoping to just get one, okay? So first of all, let me ask you a question. Who in this audience, raising your hand, is a copyright holder? Who owns a copyright in some work that they've created? Okay, very good. I'm going to ask this question in just a couple of minutes, and I'm going to see if the answer is different based on what I tell you. Okay? Copyright is an important part of the U.S. legal system, and it's also an important part of the Library of Congress. We have been part of the Library of Congress since 1870. That's a good long time. And the reason that that is great for the library is because, as Megan mentioned, many works of anime and manga come to the Library of Congress through the copyright process, okay? What is copyright, first of all? So you've probably heard these terms like copyright and trademark and patent and things like that. Copyright is what protects creators and gives them rights in their works, okay? So it's been around a long time, actually since the founding of our country. It's mentioned in a way in the Constitution, in Article 8, Section 8, and the founding fathers, as they called themselves then, they were really interested in that, and the reason they were is the same reason that people are interested in it right now, and that is that creative people want to make a living, right? If you're an artist, if you're an anime illustrator, if you write books, if you take pictures, and you want to make a living, then if you have your works protected, then that allows you to make money off of your works and continue being a creative person. And that's why copyright was created a long time ago, and that's still why we have it today. So the reasons historically still remain the same. So copyright is this concept, this legal concept, but it's really actually pretty simple. Basically, when you create something, when you create something, you become a copyright holder, okay? So if you take a picture, like that, yes, there you go. If you take a picture, or if you write a book, or if you draw some anime or manga, create some work, if you put together a creative and original costume design and then put it together, and if you write a poem or create your own comic book or any of those things, the moment that you do that, the moment that you have it in a fixed form, then you own the copyright. So that applies to almost anything you create. Probably not to, let's say, if you're singing a song in front of the audience and it's not recorded in any way, then that's not protected by copyright because there's no fixed form. It's got to be fixed. If you're drawing a picture on the beach in the sand and the water comes and washes it away, then you might not be protected because it's only there for a split second. But you know, I'm not a lawyer, so I'm not going to try to get to that kind of level of specificity there. But basically, anybody who creates something is a copyright holder. And copyright holders, creators, have certain rights that they get through copyright. And you get these for free. Isn't that great? This is part of the law. You have the right to copy your work, so if you create one, then you can make copies of it and you can sell it or do whatever you want with it. You can give it away if you want to. You can distribute it in any way that you want to. If you create a play, some sort of a performing arts, you can perform it. If you create a work of art, you can display it. And you can create works from those works. Those are called derivative works. And so when you do that, you own that copyright. You can also give it to somebody or sell it to somebody or license somebody to be able to do that. It's sort of like, it's like a title in a car or a deed to a house. It's like an ownership certificate, like a little registration. And so you get that automatically. Now, at the Library of Congress, at the U.S. Copyright Office, we will register your works. That's an extra process, and you get certain benefits from doing that. The benefits are basically that if somebody infringes on your work, that is, if they copy it without your permission, then you can take them to court if you've registered. It's very easy to do. You can do it online. Copyright.gov. By the way, copyright is spelled copy, C-O-P-Y-R-I-G-H-T. Some people are tempted to do it W-R-I-T-E, which also sort of makes sense, but that's not how it's spelled. Anyway, copyright.gov. You can register your work, $55 That's pretty good, right? I mean, to get that protection. But even without doing that, you are protected and you own that copyright. So, I'll ask again, now that you know this, right, you've learned this, how many people in this room, and I see a lot of creative people, I can see it everywhere, all around me, how many people in this room are copyright holders? All hands go up, yes, because everyone has created something, I know it. Hey, excellent. So that is really exciting. And I encourage you to register with the U.S. Copyright Office. What is it again? Copyright.gov, right?
With
the
an R.
there it is. Copyright.gov. Gov is for government. That's where we are. Just in case you forget. And we're part of the Library of Congress. And so we encourage you to do that. We and the copyright law promote creativity. So I know all of you are creative people, and that's why we're here, to promote that and encourage creativity. You can find lots of useful things on our website. We have something about fair use. I don't know if you've ever heard of that. People talk about that, they toss that term around. That's basically, you can find out if it's okay. There are certain circumstances where it's okay to use other people's work. Some people actually encourage it, some companies do, some people and some companies and publishers are much more protective about it. Check with them and check with us, and we'll give you some guidelines on how you can proceed there. So visit us. There it is, copyright.gov. So that's what I have to say about copyright. That's the basics of it. And is anybody excited about copyright now? There we go. All right, excellent. Thank you very much.
Good job. So I do have a few questions, as I said earlier. So just to ask, in Otakon and other cons around the world, we have what we call Artist Alley, where artists create art and sell it. And sometimes the art could be characters from anime. Maybe you might change them up a little bit, steampunk or something, but most of the time it could be the character drawn in the artist's own way. But you can still recognize that, for example, it's Goku or it's Keith or something like that. Are they protected in doing that? Like, can they do that?
So I'm not a lawyer. I don't give legal advice. I'm not a doctor. I don't give medical advice. Although I did play one on TV once, but that's another story. I'll tell you that later. But and that's why I encourage you to check our website about fair use. And basically when somebody creates something, they own those rights, right? And there are certain circumstances, let's say for educational purposes, or if you're writing a news story, that there are fair use provisions. And if you're in doubt, go to the author's website, ask them. Sometimes authors are very explicit on their publishers' pages about whether or not they encourage or discourage use of their works. So you can find out that way and do some research and find out for yourself so that you can be a responsible user of copyright.
There's actually a really great reference team in the Copyright Office that is, they can't give legal advice, but they are really great at helping you do research related to copyright. Who's the copyright holder? How do I find out about, what if it's registered, if the thing that I'm looking at is registered for copyright or not? And so it's not, they don't just send you in there blind and say, here, go figure this out. No, there's like a really awesome reference team that's in Georgia's office. So they don't have an Ask a Librarian page yet. There's been talk for a number of years.
But we have a contact us.
But you have a contact. They have a contact us. So feel free to reach out to them through email. If you have questions about doing research, because that's what there's a whole staff group there that's dedicated to doing research on copyright. Sorry, George, I just.
No, thank you. Thank you very much.
Okay, so I'll bring one more question back to Megan because it just came ahead. What because we were talking about this earlier, defining what is a graphic novel and what is a floppy and what is manga. Because as I was telling you before, when you go to a typical bookstore, they lump manga with graphic novels. I know in the library we use graphic novel to mean something else. So
We do. So from an extremely nerdy cataloging perspective, things that have an ISBN, so books, if you look on the back in the barcode, it says ISBN and there's usually a 16-digit number. That, and it looks like maybe a comic book or it has graphic content, that would be considered by the library a graphic novel because it is a single publication. It's not a series or a serialized item. So, for example, collected editions of various comics, you get like a one-volume like collected edition. It is a single book, and we consider it a graphic novel rather than like a comic book. A lot of libraries actually don't distinguish, and a lot of the scholarly community doesn't necessarily distinguish, and the user community doesn't necessarily distinguish it like we do. It truly is from a cataloging perspective, which is really boring. But so floppies, comic books, have what's called an ISSN, which is an International Standard Serial Number, which is the magazine number. So if you look on any of your magazines, like Time Magazine, it has an ISSN. Comic books all have, or many comic books have an ISSN, and that is kind of the official way we designate between them. It's not as interesting as, but that's why you have to go to 2 different buildings to view those materials at the library, because we catalog them separately.
yeah. Okay, so we have less than a minute, so we can start the Q. So we can start the Q&A. Yes. Yeah. Okay. So if you guys have any questions for me or anyone on the panel, raise your hand. And lovely Sasha from the Young Reader Center will bring the mic over.
It's on. Hello, hello, hello. Testing, testing. Yay, we can hear. All right.
Sorry, what kind of internships do you guys have or stuff for people like in library school or interested in cataloging comics, etc.?
So there's an official internship program at the library. There's the Junior Fellows program, which is a summer program. That comes with money. Money. But throughout the year, actually, the library takes interns. So if you go to the Jobs and Fellowships page on the library's website, you could also get in touch with us through Ask a Librarian, and we can get you to that page. The library is currently centralizing its internships and fellowships, so it used to be a little bit more freeform than it is. But yeah, if you want to come and work on cataloging stuff, we want you to come and help us catalog because we have a massive backlog.
Yes.
Massive.
The website is loc.gov/IFP internships and fellowships. Internship and fellowship program.
So
And if you like to work with kids, come apply for an internship at the Young Reader Center.
Are you plugging right now?
No. Oh, I'm sorry. I promised this down.
Out of the comic book collection, how much of that is there a significant percentage of it that's public domain? And if so, is there any plans to digitize that and make it available online?
yes, no, there's not. The bulk of the comic book collection is still protected by U.S. copyright because most of it was published after 1923. The next, George, you can answer this. The next time something comes into the public domain from the 1920s is in what, like 16 years or something?
No, it's January 1st. January 1st, 1924. And then every year from that point forward, another year.
So it will be at least another 10 plus years before anything that's considered historical comic book material, which kind of comes, the history of US comics is generally considered to start in the 1930s with Famous Funnies, which reprinted newspaper strips and then some original comic art. So DC and Marvel, for example, none of that's going to be in the public domain, so we can't actually make it publicly available. Although what we do have publicly available are 2 webcomics collections, which I work on. So we've gone out to ask creators who publish their work online if we can document their websites for the library's collections. And the 2 collections launched last year. We'll be adding new sites every year. I'm adding sites all the time. So if there's actually a webcomic that you read that you think the library should preserve, send me an Ask a Librarian suggestion, because I totally take suggestions. There's so much webcomic content that I can't possibly know it all. Sorry, that being said, we could potentially put like an online exhibit, maybe with permission from the copyright holders. But yeah, unfortunately we can't digitize things because most of it's still protected by copyright, and it will be for an extremely long period of time.
Hey there, on the flip side of the first question, I wanted to ask, do y'all happen to have any residency programs or fellowship beginning librarian programs for those who are just about to be out of library school?
Yeah, so the Junior Fellows program is the main one that we have. There may be some new ones developing.
There's a new one that the new cohort started of like brand new. Like
oh yeah, there is.
It's like a 6-month program. If you look up
Innovators, something, Library Innovators.
Oh, that's
Sorry.
a separate one.
That's
There's
a
a
separate
library innovators, and then there's like a librarian in residence program that runs
there's a
for
few.
about 6 months. So look that up because it was.
Just to clarify, are those in all departments or most departments?
I'm not sure about that.
Yeah.
Okay.
I bet it's they pair you with whatever your area of interest is across the library.
And
would be my guess.
if you have multiple, both departments will look at you and they'll
talk to
just put you somewhere.
Yeah.
Okay, that makes sense. Thank you.
Hi, how are you? Hi. So I want to say first, it's totally cool you guys like our professional librarians. And it's wonderful what you guys do, preserving all this historical work and stuff and keeping it in the public eye interest. My question is actually, how do you guys go about keeping the public's interest in stuff, especially in, you're talking about libraries and books and stuff that a few years ago people weren't really interested in, and how do you keep people's interest in the historical significance of your work?
We come to Otakon.
We do panels like this and have groups.
Yeah, I mean, we're constantly trying to figure that out. How do we get people to come in and use the collections for research? Again, like a lot of people don't know that we have it. So part of it is just letting people know that we have it and that it's available to them. It's engaging with people where they are.
Well, in the speaking for the Asian Division and International Collections, we've been trying to get more active on social media. And actually, I forgot to mention, if you're interested in accessing any Asian language materials, I have a little flyer here. Feel free to stop by and get one of those from me. But I have links to we have a Facebook page. It's Library of Congress International Collections, and we try to feature interesting things, upcoming talks, new materials, that kind of thing. So if that's something that interests you, please look for Library of Congress International Collections and like us. We also have a blog, the Four Corners of the World International Collections blog. So we're trying to get things out, searchable, discoverable, so people can come across them, because not everyone will come to the library website and do a search for these things, but they might be searching for something elsewhere and stumble across it. So we're trying to increase the chances that people will come stumbling to the collections and find it.
Yes, and speaking for the European Division, it's pretty much mirroring what Cameron said. Check out the blog, it's amazing. And for me, for what we do, we try to go to a lot of different European, Scandinavian events, like the US, like the Embassy of Finland or something like that is having an event. We try to go, do outreach, speak to people, see if we can, start an exchange relations, things like that. So, and of course, coming to events like this, so that always helps.
Copyright, trademark versus copyright, what's the difference?
In a nutshell, a trademark is used to identify a business. So the shape of the Coca-Cola bottle, or the Intel sound, doo 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 doo, right? Or IBM, the logo that you see, that's used to identify a business or a service, and that's what trademark protects. Copyright protects a bunch of other things, books and movies and anime and sculpture and photographs.
And that's a totally separate government agency. completely, totally separate.
So, to what extent are your collections integrated with the online services available from the Library of Congress? How could I access information for research or otherwise in another state without coming to visit?
Should I go with that? Okay, sure. So probably, as mentioned, one of the best ways, if you need help with finding materials, again, the Ask Librarian is great. We have our online catalog, which is catalog.loc.gov. That's probably the main entry point, and from there you can search for items across the collection, books, periodicals, films, fine art prints, photography, etc. There's also an increasing effort to catch up with digitization. In the Asian division, we haven't been able to digitize as much as we would have liked yet. We do have well, I won't go into the details for time's sake, but also across the board in the library, especially our manuscripts division, has really been redoubling their efforts to digitize materials and make them available for people who can't come to access them physically. So I would say check out the digital collections. There's a link on the front page of the loc.gov website, and you can kind of see what you can find through there.
And I would say too that there are still materials that are not listed in the library's catalog across the board. So if you don't find something that you're looking for in the library's catalog, online catalog, or digitized on our website, it's always worth asking us if we have any materials that either the title that you're looking for or related materials, because there are those of us who have a backlog at their desk. So, chances are we could go digging somewhere and find it. The other thing I would say is that part of the reason sometimes we have a delay in making things accessible is because they come through the Copyright Office and then have to go through cataloging, and then they come to the reading room. So it's a multi-step process. So again, if you don't see it in the catalog, that doesn't necessarily mean that it's not there.
As you leave today, be sure to pick up a little handy one-page flyer that has resources on it so that you can have that at your fingertips.
Hi, I just had a question about public domain. If a work goes into public domain, is it just the work itself, or do characters ever go into the public domain?
Well, once something is in the public domain, then it's free for all.
Right.
So
I'll clarify a little bit. Let's say Steamboat Willie ever goes into the public domain, which is a big if. Would I be allowed to use Mickey Mouse in a work, or is that still strictly Disney's?
Yeah. As a matter of fact, one of the reasons that copyright was extended in the 1990s was from some influence by the Walt Disney Company, and so they're pretty protective about their rights. So I'm not giving advice here, but I would be careful about using anything from Disney.
Something for characters that are long running, I feel like there might be a part of an early storyline that might be in public domain technically, but the character might, again, not giving legal advice. We really need to clarify that. But so because every time they publish a new Mickey Mouse story, they're basically renewing the copyright, right? Ish. It's not necessarily, okay.
He's probably trademarked though.
Again, not legal advice, but with Disney, chances are slim that it will go in public domain, but that's my personal opinion.
I wanted to thank you for your attempts at archiving the transitory nature of digital culture and websites and things that were up in like 2000, just like little website projects that like college kids made and then just disappeared immediately. And that, I think, really helps with the preservation of culture in the long term. And I completely lost my train of thought. That's great. yeah.
So something that I would love to see is for all of the reference staff to be able to have their own web archive collections related to their area of specialty. We're not there yet, but I'm hoping we'll get there because I think a lot of the contemporary discussion, so like what used to happen in newspapers and like fan magazines and stuff now happens online. And we need to preserve that. That's my opinion.
Yeah.
And the library, I think, is in a unique place where we might be able to do that. A lot of other libraries don't have the capacity to do that like we can.
Yeah, my specific question is that it shows in expansion and scope in the library's mission statement, so to speak. And I was curious, I've seen a lot of very fascinating, exceedingly thought-provoking panels here, this one included. And I was wondering if there are any efforts made to preserve this kind of thing, because it's very
so there, sorry, I'm like totally taking over.
Oh, well, no, I'll just say all of, we do that to an extent. Most of our public talks are generally webcast, not always live, but there's usually a recording made. Captions are provided as well for accessibility, and usually within a month or so of taking place at the library, you can view them online.
So and to supplement that, as far as like preserving the culture of Otakon, like itself, we're in theory, Otakon Corporation will be archiving their own website and like discussions and things. But what something that we at the library can particularly collect would be blogs or other sites related to cosplay, for example, and that's something that I actually want to add, and I've been working with some of the specialists to do, because I think that there's a lot out there that isn't being documented that we should be documenting. Oh, yeah, that's a complicated question. I can talk to you more about that.
Hi. So first off, I wanted to recommend a webcomic for you.
Okay.
It's actually, we're cosplaying as characters from it.
Okay.
It's called Gunner Craig Court.
We already collected.
Oh, hooray.
Yeah, so I don't know that it's public yet, but yeah, it's on my list, it's in my archive, so.
Also, I wanted to ask, what does the Library of Congress consider literature? Like, what is the kind of literature you're looking to preserve? Would it just be a cover-to-cover book, a webcomic? Is there any set definition?
All of it.
All of it.
Yeah.
All of it.
Zines. We actually started a zine collection.
Some collections that come.
Yeah. It isn't just the Bronte sisters. That's not how we're defining it. And I think you get a different answer depending on who you ask at the library. In my opinion, all of like the zines and the online content and all of that stuff, we need to be preserving.
We use the term universal collection of knowledge a lot, and I think there's the National Library of Medicine and the National Library of Agriculture, and they collect in those areas, but everything else is up for grabs for us.
Yes. Flyers, brochures, even propaganda from other countries, depending on what they're going. We collected everything.
Okay, I think, do we have to vacate this room?
We have 4 minutes.
4 minutes, okay. Sorry, I think we can squeeze in a couple more questions.
So I wanted to follow up on the webcomic question.
Yeah.
So you're saying you're preserving that, and it's very recent, obviously, it's the internet. And a lot of those authors do collect their works for sale as well as
Right.
art. And it's copyrighted, but
Right.
you're collecting and making public domain access. Do you go off the author and request permission, or is there a controversy there?
We make it publicly accessible. The rights holders still retain their rights. So we actually have to get explicit permission from the creators in order to be able to crawl and preserve webcomics. So we take a very, and George can maybe attest to this a little bit, but from a librarian perspective, we take a very conservative interpretation of the copyright law. All of the materials that we collect all of those rights are still held by the creators. We don't take that away from anybody, and we get explicit permission from all of the webcomics creators before we even crawl their site. I can't go and crawl their site with our program. We use a local installation of the Wayback Machine, and we use the same kind of open source software that the Internet Archive uses. But I can't crawl a webcomic and make it part of our collection without having explicit permission. So we take that very seriously.
We're gonna do 2 more very quick questions.
Hello. First of all, thank you guys for everything you do to preserve knowledge. It's super important. I was wondering, like, as far as licenses go, are there open licenses for these webcomics that are like automatically attached, so you could just crawl the website without having to get the author's permission?
Creative Commons. That's the only one that's an open license. So anybody that uses a Creative Commons license, basically they're indicating that they're okay with other people using and reusing their content. So for that, we wouldn't. For .gov websites, we don't have to get permission because it's nothing that the government creates is copyrightable. George, you might be able to, but almost everything else, if it's considered an artistic or I forget what the creative expression, we have to get permission to crawl it, and then and then whoever's looking at it online has to get permission to reuse it directly. We don't provide permission. They have to get it directly from the creator.
So my question is, so when you get copyright stuff from other countries, how does that interact with the Library of Congress?
So there's no such thing as international copyright law, but there are treaties. So that basically almost every country except North Korea and a couple other ones respect each other's copyright laws. So there are international treaties that apply, and we respect their copyrights and they respect ours.
And as far as like making that material available, there's like a certain rule of thumb where if a publisher from another country has a certain distribution size in the United States, they are required by law to deposit with the U.S. Copyright Office. I don't know if the same is true in other countries, but like we do get international materials through that mechanism as well. Sorry, I don't know if that actually answers your question. Okay, sorry, we're done. I'll hang around at the back if anybody wants to ask questions.
Excuse me. Were you the one that said you're about to graduate?
Yes.
USA Jobs, Library of Congress. This is how you find all the different jobs for the federal government on USA Jobs, including the Library of Congress. I wasn't sure if you...
USAJobs.gov.
USAJobs.gov. They have jobs for all branches of the federal government.
Okay, I'll take a look.
Yeah, good luck actually getting a job for the U.S. government, though. They take 6 months. And they take 6 months for them to get applied. The hiring process, it takes a long time.
I know. I'm a federal employee.
Well, the real question is, how are you supposed to actually get a job?
You have to apply, a little bit of persistence and a little bit of luck.
I'm going to go just look at the question in the back.
I'm pretty sure I met you at ALA. I remember. I'm Marie. I have this place to business card. I'm so sorry. That's okay. Okay, you know the store Aldo? Yes. Aldo at LOC. Okay, yeah. Oh, that's perfect. This is the boyfriend I was talking about. Oh.